Joining us today on Practical 365 is Justin Morris from Microsoft. Hi Justin, how are you?
Hey Steve, good to be here, thanks.
So you recently joined Microsoft in a new role. Do you want to tell us more about what you do?
Yeah, so I've joined Microsoft Customer Success as a modern communications CSM, and what I do is help UK organizations really embrace and unleash the power of Teams meetings, calling, and devices. So that's everything from kind of demos and workshops to helping with technical onboarding and user adoption, and really like the entire spectrum of organizations kind of embracing the new world of hybrid work on Teams.
So we were going to talk about hybrid work, meetings, and obviously Teams today, because Microsoft unveiled their vision for the future of hybrid meetings recently. So in the last podcast, we talked about that announcement briefly with Paul, but I thought it'd be really interesting to get the Microsoft view, because this is a world that you sort of live in, and prior to anything over the last few years has been your passion in terms of user adoption and working with organizations to affect that sort of change as well, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. It's been a massive passion of mine my entire career, really. Like from when I first got my hands on Office Communication Server, right way now through to Teams. It's kind of crazy to just see how far everything's come from people from just being able to use it on your desktop right the way through to kind of mobile to some of these really immersive things that we're developing in rooms.
So Microsoft unveiled the vision recently. What does it involve then? What's the big change that people need to be aware of?
Yeah, so it's anchored on both the synchronous experience in the meeting, but also the asynchronous aspect of that, because what we're trying to achieve here is an experience that's really inclusive and equitable for everybody. Because as we start to embark on more of a hybrid way of working, it's not going to be everybody return to the office and you've got to go use those sort of creaky old devices that were just left there and have had dust collecting on them over the last 18 months. It's about how can we create a new hybrid experience that works for people that choose to come back into the office, but also allows people to fully participate and feel like they're in the room where it's happening if they are still working from home. And so from the hybrid meeting point of view, it's about innovating from the traditional view of a meeting room of, if it's a boardroom, you get that bowling alley view of people sat down one side and you get the desk. And if I think everybody's joined a video conference a couple of years ago, even if you're joined remotely, you feel like you have to sort of like be doubly extroverted to feel like you've got a voice in the room, and you're not quite sure, was it Steve talking at the end of the room? I'm not quite sure, because it just says boardroom as the person joined into the meeting, and it's just one little square in the gallery. So we're looking at that and just completely like pulling that apart and making it so that rooms, when they participate in a meeting, do show up in the gallery like everybody else shows up, because we've gone through this real transformation over the last 18 months of all working from home, where everybody has been equal in the meeting, and it hasn't been a sense of one person has a louder voice because they're in the room physically. It's everybody's represented equally within Teams meetings. And so as we start to utilize physical spaces more, how we can still bring that really equitable experience. And that comes in some innovations around the layouts that we're producing, and some innovations with partner hardware that will start to produce that, and some new partners coming on board. But then on the asynchronous side of things, it's about utilizing things like the new fluid components that we're launching, so that you can bring in an agenda and notes and actions that were created before the meeting into the meeting, and then co-author on those during, and then take them with you after to make sure that things get followed up. So it is a real sort of continuum across everything that makes a hybrid meeting work well.
So one thing that stood out to me from the last Ignite was we saw this future vision for meetings, and I'd seen a few over the years at Build maybe 2 years ago that expressed a lot of those concepts. So this looked quite finished in a way, but also in the same respect, whilst I could see a lot of concepts that I've heard and seen from Microsoft, it also looked quite futuristic with these short throw projectors, a together mode view with a black background across the bottom of the screen with much larger participants being brought into the meeting room, and then content above. How far off in the future is that vision to actually landing in people's boardrooms or smaller meeting rooms?
Yeah, so we're working towards later on in this year to be able to release that new experience. And it is a combination of improvements and enhancements to the meetings layout and also the hardware that's available in those rooms, and also the prescriptive guidance that we're looking to provide to customers around how to set up a really great in-room experience with that so that you can get that entire layout that you described there with the short throw projectors producing onto a kind of large video wall that then displays the agenda or the notes on one side and the chat on the other. And so there's kind of a continuous kind of parallel streams of innovation happening there, but we're targeting later on this year.
So the front row view was the thing that was in the announcements a couple of weeks ago, and that really sort of, it's almost foreshadowing, is not the right word, but it looked like it's got the same components, just delivered in a slightly different way. So meeting videos rather than a together mode. The concept shown in the images is traditional single or two TV panels, screen panels on the meeting room wall. But it's got some of those concepts there. So does that mean that, and again, it's got the meeting transcript, it's got agenda items. Does that mean that people are going to get these benefits even if they've not got short throw projectors or they've used prescriptive guidance?
Yeah, there's a few examples that we've published in some blog posts of this experience in different size rooms. So there's really the entire boardroom one that we demonstrated, which had the semicircle table and had the short throw cameras. But then there's also the smaller focus room size where we've got more of a sort of blown up square display within that front row layout across the bottom, but still maintaining the agenda and the transcript and the chat. So there will be a lot of these innovations that will be enhancements to the meetings experience themselves, and then you'll still be able to utilize your investments in hardware that you've got with your existing cameras and things. That will just be the difference of the experience in terms of how participants are displayed within the layout in the front row. Maybe slightly diverse depending on the hardware and the cameras that you've got.
So given you're working with a lot of different customers at the moment, some mostly, I guess, based out of the UK then, what are they asking Microsoft right now? What's the key thing that they need?
Yeah, primarily it's about maintaining the level playing field that has been established since we all started working from home. And as we go back to working at the office, that they're asking Microsoft for, hey, tell us how we can continue to maintain that experience as people work in meeting rooms and join meetings, and also give us more flexibility around how we utilize the Teams meeting space with things like participants and chat and keeping an eye on who's got their hands raised at the time. Like I had some feedback from a CEO last week that said, I'd love to be able to see the chat happening live, but then also see who's raised their hands and be able to dynamically go between that, because he thought it was important to be able to very quickly react based on what attendees are asking for in the meeting. And so we're looking at how we can innovate around that to just make it a lot simpler to moderate and run a meeting. But also, as people are returning to the office, it's about making it as inclusive and equitable as possible so that we get away from that kind of ballroom alley view that I looked at. And so we're hearing that feedback loud and clear and making sure that goes into a lot of the decisions around how we innovate the product.
And that's definitely one of those weird things that I've seen where perhaps I didn't really think it through until I experienced it. But being that small participant in the top right corner that only appears when they speak isn't good enough. You can't run a meeting like that, and perhaps you shouldn't need to go into the office to run a meeting. You know, if your day's at home and somebody else's day is in the office, then you shouldn't have to reorganize your life or vice versa around that. Ideally, and I've been in this situation for years where you're at the end of a speaker puck and you've got to say, Steve here,
Yeah.
or
Excuse me.
yes, I've just got something I wanted to say, and then and they have to say, oh, it's Jerry here or Phyllis, so you can know who it is on the other end. It's difficult, and that there's a lot to be said for improving that. And if you are in that situation where you've had this stuff, is there anything that people are perhaps doing at the moment that they shouldn't be? That is there a common thread where you have to sort of course correct? And if you could tell people in advance, just avoid doing this, that it'd make a difference. What's most important for them to consider?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's coming down to advice we're giving around meeting etiquette. And as people start to have more in-person meetings, and there's a few people within a space itself, is we're saying make sure that you be very mindful that there's a lot of other people joined to this meeting remotely, so you don't have side conversations with the person next to you. But if you do, like make that vocal and be like, oh, actually, bring this into the meeting and make sure that it's very like inclusive with the conversation that's taking place. And also as well, if you've got multiple people sitting around a room, I could actually have them join the Teams meeting from their laptop and then just be on mute but have their camera there, because then you can see that it's Steve, Justin, Tom, Mike sitting around the table, and they're visible within the meeting itself, rather than that experience you said there was like, oh, who said that within the room itself. And so just being a lot more proactive with how you're accommodating for the fact that there's still going to be a lot of people joining online to the meetings.
Yeah, because we've got intelligent speakers, but that's only from two vendors, ePass and Yealink.
Mm.
So if you're designing a meeting room and you've got in ceiling mics, you've built it appropriately, then you're not necessarily going to go back and buy new devices. And there's just not the range, is there? So those are going to be techniques that are going to get you through, I suppose, until that point where you are automatically identified. It's a bit of a route there to get everything to catch up. And that equitable experience then, that what does that mean then if you've not heard that term used with meetings before? Is that as you were saying before, everybody's equal as a participant or a presenter?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so it's about everybody feeling like they are in the room where it's happening, and that people don't feel left out of key discussions or key decisions that are made. And so that it goes beyond meetings as well. So there's side conversation that happens before or after a meeting sometimes when you're wrapping up and you go, oh, actually, that's a good idea. Yeah, we should do that.
Yeah.
And you would, like traditionally, you'll just kind of like run off and just act on it. But it's actually taking the time to say, well, hang on, there were 6 people joined to that Teams meeting that need to know about that idea that we just sparked. And so actually let's put a conversation in a channel and mention everybody, so we can have that sort of artifact that somebody came up with, and make sure that it kind of continues the thread, or put it in the meeting chat or something like that, so that it's all just about being more mindful about how you take work forward, so that it's not about like a customer made this really clear to me the other day, where they said like equality is when everybody has the same thing, but equity is when everybody can see over the fence together, when they've all got the right tool to be able to have the same experience. And so that's when we think Teams is really the right tool and platform to do that, because you can kind of take those ideas and things that come up after the meeting and actually put it in front of the right people, so they can still feel included and you can be proactive with it.
So the things that you're almost forced to do when you're working remotely, such as you said, having those chats online, trying to make sure that they don't accidentally flow into walking to get a coffee afterwards. And then really the business has lost the right people. They've got to redo that chat's got to happen again, or it's going to be forgotten. Something's going to be delayed. The right person isn't around. So there's really it's business driven as well as people driven then as well. So there's benefit to the business in using this kind of way of working. Do you enforce this, or do you encourage it? Is it a carrot or a stick thing?
Yeah, it is. it's definitely, it comes from a leadership and a cultural shift that we think needs to happen in organizations. And that really
Yeah.
underpins this hybrid work framework that we produced, which has those elements at the start, and then it wraps around three key pillars of thinking about how we work with people, how we work with our places, and then how we evolve our processes, and then having the right secure, inclusive, cloud-powered technology underneath it all with like a layer of experimentation, because organizations are going to need to evolve this over time, depending on things like, God forbid, another variant doesn't come through and send us all down into lockdown. But you build process around all the offices are reopening and we expect everybody to be back in the office, then what happens if something, you need to go back out of the office again? So just having that flexible mindset to it all, and not going back into old ways of working and diverging between the sense of, if you work from home, you feel like a second class citizen again, because all the key people in the business have gone back into the offices, and they're, all the kind of benefits that come from that, of presenteeism and things like that. Like we need to work hard as people and organizations to avoid that.
Yeah. And as you say, that needs executive support. It may need HR teams. It's more than just putting the kit into the right rooms, showing people the right way of using it. It is involving an element of business change then to gain that support. And there's going to be people who presenteeism has worked for as well. So some resistance to that, that's got to be overcome. So it makes this slightly harder, but the benefit is going to be bigger then.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing this as high on the agenda for leadership. In fact, we're seeing like a lot of a push down into the technology organizations of our customers, because leaders want to ensure that it is a equal experience for everybody as we start to embark on a new way. So I think previously a lot of technology change has been trying to sell the benefit to the business to have to get them to come on that journey to Office 365. But I think we have a bit of a benefit now, is that leaders, as they go back to the offices, like I've got one CEO we're working with who's kitting out a new boardroom, and he wants to make sure that everybody has an equitable experience in that, regardless of where they join that meeting from. So it's definitely becoming more of a top-down driven initiative that's coming into tech teams to say, make sure the rooms are fitted out with the right technology and hardware, so that everybody feels like they're in the room together.
Yeah, and we had Accenture on the podcast the other week, and they said, well, actually, we thought a lot about this beforehand. So we had meeting room devices, we had Surface Hubs, we're an international business, we need to share knowledge, we need people to collaborate across offices already, effectively, to really sort of summarise what they were saying. So you would apparently go into a meeting room, and prior to all of this, they've got Surface Hubs ready to use and so on. And that's, it's not pandemic driven. It's customers that have been thinking about how to get the best out of it and the best business outcome prior to this. And it's just everybody else has had to sort of follow along the way. And these benefits have been clear to many customers, maybe not all. It's got to change. So you're driving a lot of that through.
Yeah, I think, and because diversity and inclusion is such a board level initiative and priority, and it really does permeate into everything that we do in work. And that just comes not only just like the ideation and getting diverse perspectives on the work that we do, but also creating the right technology experiences, and things like the accessibility features in Office 365 just continue to sort of push that capability and benefit. And so I think that's something that, if you are looking at how you re-kit out some of your meeting spaces with Teams rooms, like just think about that and look at how you have conversations with your leadership around diversity and inclusion and the benefits that Teams rooms can offer with that.
So if you want to learn about more Microsoft initiatives in this area, prescriptive guidance, where can we find that?
Yeah, a few places to have a look at. So we have a resource called WorkLab, which is where we're publishing a lot of our research and findings on hybrid work. So you'll see like a key blog post to read there is actually how we produced this whole new hybrid meetings experience with Front Row and all the ideation that we went through, where some folks in Redmond got like some big corrugated cardboard and like Costco tables and started like playing around with what the right layout was until they got it right, all the way through to what you've seen in some of the videos. So Work Lab is definitely worth having a look at. And then keeping an eye on the tech community blog, which is where all the Microsoft Teams announcements go first.
Thank you for joining us on the show, Justin. And it's been good to get you on a podcast again. It's been a long time since the UC Architects.
It has, yeah. It feels like an age ago. It's like the old crew. But yeah, it's definitely good, mate.
Cheers. Speak to you soon.
Cool. Cheers, Dave. Thanks.